Hello and welcome to today's CLE program. My name is Mark Silver and I am a criminal mitigation expert working in New York City. I've done about 2,000 cases for immigration and criminal lawyers over the years, including several personal injury cases for civil litigation matters. And today I'm presenting a CLE on, I think, one of the single most important topics for criminal defense lawyers, and that is mitigation of clients who have suffered complex trauma. We often consider issues in a person's past and obviously want to consider anything and everything when we're mitigating a case to help explain how a client got to be in so much trouble. By far the most serious issue is complex trauma, which is what we're talking about today, and it concerns individuals who have suffered systemic abuse and neglect in their childhoods. And this has prohibited them from developing in a normal manner. In fact, they necessarily develop in a pathological manner. Why? Because unbelievable levels of stress throughout their childhood and teenage years, because of the complex trauma, has caused them severe neurological, developmental, and psychological and emotional problems that are pervasive to their decision-making, to their everyday lives, their judgment, and it very much informs how they got to be in so much trouble. There is a chapter in my book on complex trauma entitled Handbook of Mitigation in Criminal and Immigration Forensics. The book was just republished a few months ago in its 7th edition, and it has, as I said, a specific chapter on complex trauma. However, please, anybody who's interested in looking at a redacted criminal mitigation sample, do not hesitate to call me or send an email. And if you send an email, I will send you back a redacted sample. Please send all your information in the email, your full name, your address, your telephone number, so that I know you're a real attorney. Unfortunately, I get a lot of spam, and I really want to make sure I'm sending something to a real email address. I promise you I'm not going to send you any junk mail. I have no interest in doing that, but I have to make sure that it's a real email address. And I will send you back a redacted copy, which basically means that all major identifying information within the criminal mitigation report will have been removed. This is an extremely huge topic, and I've tried to compact it into a single CLE 1-hour program. And we're going to be looking today at complex trauma and mitigation. Then we're going to be looking at psychosocial evaluations. The next part of the program is looking at ACEs, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience Evaluation. Next, we're going to look at developmental perspectives on trauma due to abuse and neglect. And finally, we're going to consider psychiatric consequences of complex trauma. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, it's extremely important to understand that many of the clients we see have suffered trauma in their childhoods. They've suffered abuse or neglect and so on, and sometimes they've even suffered that in their early adulthood. That is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about complex trauma. Complex trauma is repeated episodes of abuse and neglect, repeated trauma causing chronic stressors. These are often invasive, they're very personal, and they most often occur by immediate caretakers and particularly parents. The emotional, the neurological development of the child is necessarily damaged, and their ability to self-regulate their emotions and their ability to develop healthy interpersonal connections is necessarily damaged. And it could be damaged for life. And all of this necessarily impacts how the individual sees himself, and it necessarily impacts how the individual interacts with others and even with his or her community in general. In short, the individual, because of the complex trauma, because of the abuses and neglects, has suffered very high levels of stress, not because of a single incident. This is absolutely crucial to understand, but has suffered very high levels of stress because of ongoing and repeated incidents of physical, emotional, sexual, verbal, psychological, and other forms of abuse. Now, normally, clearly, a caregiver's bond with a child is supposed to provide stability and security, certainty, predictability, safety, and so on. And because the caregivers are abusive, the child is unable to enjoy that in childhood. And because the child is unable to enjoy that, there is necessarily going to be extremely systemic harm that child suffers.